In the first project, I gave you a basic introduction into Blender, the UI, how to create geometry, edit mode, object mode, and we built a garden chair, kind of like this wood palette design we have here. This was also very good to introduce you to basic shading and lighting and how to create a three-dimensional wood material so that the material all the time calculates the wood grain and the end grain accurately for us. Specifically when we do cuts for joinery, then we can't really find always the correct textures to texture that. So in that case, when we deal with a volume, it's easier to actually work with a volume material, so 3D. Now, I would like to go one step forward and introduce you now how to create bent plywood furniture. First, bent plywood is not actually a volume, kind of like wood, so it's not ground, because we actually deal with the top veneer and the bottom veneer, and then we also see the side or the layers. So here we have to approach texturing somewhat differently. Plus, bent plywood furniture is, well, as the name also implies, it is or shows a lot of bent elements, and there are two different ways how we can approach this. We can bend everything, or basically we model everything bent, and then later we have to unwrap it and try to texture it. Or we can, for example, if the design allows it, so for example like here or like here, those are very simple designs, we can build everything flat and then we texture it, which will be very easy because it's a flat object. The unwrapping is just a lot easier, and then via bend tools we bend the object into the shape we actually want. So let's go to Blender. Make sure you have the unit system set to imperial and inches is selected. I will work with inches for this project a lot. And our first task will be to create some sort of block geometry that helps us to kind of like create the basic proportion of the furniture piece before I actually really start modeling anything. So Shift A, let's create a plane, and the plane, for example, will be our the surface we're sitting on. So this one is around 18 inches off the ground, so I can move the object up. And from top view we see X, that's the width, and that's roughly, for example, let's say 18 inches, and then the depth is around 17 inches. Okay, perfect, good. So that's basically our seating area. We could, for example, Shift D, make a copy, press Escape, and then I move this one down to the ground. So I actually kind of like have these corner points on the ground, and that's, for example, useful when I want to know where later maybe my legs actually should be. Okay, so how do we do the backrest? The backrest is kind of like the same width and then basically 16 to 17 inches, so similar to this object we have, and then it is at an angle. Okay, so what I will do is Shift D and then maybe along Y in my case move it away, because I would like to select these 2 points in edit mode, Shift S cursor to, Shift S cursor to selected, and then in object mode I will set the origin of this object to the 3D cursor, because now when I rotate it, you see it rotates around that edge visually, but I mean technically speaking it just rotates around the object point. Okay, I can move it to there. And the main reason why I did this is when I rotate it now, I don't rotate the mesh. So you see the dimensions of the object always stay the same. If I again rotate the mesh, you see the dimension changed. So again, another reason why such things we want to do in object mode. Then, for example, we can put this one up to 90 degrees, and then we would say apply rotation. Okay, because now I can define nicely how much it goes backwards. So maybe, let's say maybe minus 10 degree for the moment. Okay, good. So that is kind of like our first step we can use. Now, this is the new version of Blender, the final one, 2.78. And at this point, maybe let me introduce you to some add-ons. So go to User Preferences, Add-ons, and up here is a search field. For example, we can type in layer, and then you should see something called 3D View Layer Management. In your case, it will be turned off, so we can turn it on simply with this click. Okay. And while this is actually the layer system, we know inside the toolbar have the layers as well. And what's nice about this is we can also give this, for example, some names. So let's say this is actually our chair proportion. Okay. There are also ways to, for example, lock a layer so we can never select it, to select objects, to switch between the different layers, etc. Or you see, actually, I moved this to there. Okay, and then you can turn it on and off. Perfect. Okay, so the process I will show you now how we will create the backrest is based on the idea that we want to have texturing afterwards to be very, very easy. So that means we will create a flat object, and then via deformation tool we bend it into the shape we need. So I could, for example, make use of this object. So Shift D, press Escape, and then I will move it onto the second layer. And chair proportion, for example, I will lock, so I cannot select the objects anymore, but I can simply snap to them. Okay, so my object has the correct X width, but along Y, this, for example, should be 32 inches because our seating area is 16, our backrest is 16 or 17, based on how you want to stretch it. So we can maybe say, yeah, let's say 33 inches. Great. Then this is actually too far on the left, so we can move this one back. And then in my case, G and Y, and then via the vertex snap and control snap to that point. Perfect. Maybe let's call this one shell. Whoops. There. Okay. Good. And this is basically the geometry, or the length of geometry I need to, for example, create then a bend result that includes also the backrest. The bonus of this also is, let's say I like actually later my bend outcome, I can unbend it and instantly have, for example, the amount of wood surface as well. The object center point is at the center, or pivot point is at the center of my geometry, which is not good. I want it to be actually at the midpoint of this edge. So I, in edit mode, select the edge, Shift S, cursor to select it, and then in object mode, I will set the origin to 3D cursor. Perfect. You might ask yourself at this point now, where is this going to, and why is it so important to have this object center point right at this front edge? Well, let me introduce you now to the curve tools. So we go to Shift A, we can go to curve, and Here we have different curves. We have Bezier and we have NURBS. Let's work with the Bezier first. So create it. Let's go to your top view and let's go into edit mode and let's take a look at what we have. So say hello to the pen tool you know from Illustrator, and this time however in 3D space. So it literally works exactly the same way. We have the node we can click and move around. We also have a handle which we can pull and this way change, for example, the shape of a curve segment, but everything works in three-dimensional space. We can, for example, via V say a handle element, so not both, but actually one should just be, for example, a vector. So what does vector mean? Let's maybe set this to a vector. Now you see now with these two handles being vector, that means they face each other and the part of the curve became or looks like a line. In Illustrator we basically would have to pull in the handles or orient the handles correctly. We can select an end node. So currently we have two nodes, so each one is an end node, and press E and, for example, drag a new extrusion out. If I now select the point, including the two handles, press V in vector, there you see now everything can be set to a vector, or it can be set to aligned. Now aligned means the two handles are always parallel to each other, but they can have different lengths. I can also set this, for example, to automatic. So you see the handles actually update. So when I move, for example, this point, see I can move it, but I don't really work actually with the handles. And this way with the automatic one I always get nice and smooth curves. And then we have the aligned now, which I mentioned to you already. And then we also have what's called free. Basically there I can actually adjust each handle individually. For example, in case I would pinch them, but still maintain them being nice and smooth. On the right side, inside the property panels, we have handles and normals. Normals for the moment maybe let's turn off, that can sometimes be annoying. And here inside the curve properties, we zoom in a little bit, you can see the curve is a little bit jaggy. So this preview 12, let's set to 32, and you see now then the curve looks a lot smoother, or 64, perfect. So this is basically here the value to have a nice and smooth curve. And in case when we work, let's say with a lot of pipes, really a lot of pipes, I mean I'm talking about 20, 40 or 100, then sometimes it's okay to set this later down to 12, because then for modeling this looks a little bit more jaggy, but for rendering it will be fine. But I want this one for the moment to be at 64. Okay, so I can select a point, press X and delete it, and you see it actually then removes it. It does not split the Bezier into two parts. I can select this point, delete it, and select this point and delete it. AA, V, and for example, let's say automatic, aligned, perfect, goodie. Okay, so next thing we can do, we can also snap them, for example, at least this and also this, to geometry. So you see this midpoint here, I can snap to this geometry, this one I can snap to the handle point, or even this polygon geometry. So it's pretty nice. Snapping works between curves and to polygon geometry. Okay, so before we continue, what we need to do is I need to get this object center point positioned right at where the 3D cursor is, and where the 3D cursor is, you see there's also the object pivot point or center point. So in edit mode, make sure you have this one node selected, Shift S, selection to cursor. Okay, and then this one maybe in top view. I can show you a different way how we can do this. So 3D cursor, AA, S and Y and 0. So along the y-axis it's lined up, and S and Z and 0. No, it's lined up along the z-axis. Okay, but now I don't have any handles here for the left node. Well, we can simply say V, and then we select vector, and there's the other one, so we can pull it out, select everything. Can also say V or automatics. So sometimes if they're pulled together, because we snapped not only the node but also the handle points to the 3D cursor, they were all hidden or overlapping each other, and then by switching the type we can show it again. Perfect. Okay, great. So what's the whole point behind this? Well, when we want to bend an object over a surface or along a line, we need to have a start point where, for example, the deformation starts. And then we also need to have a direction along which direction we would like to deform. And we need to establish this actually. So this is now very crucial that you understand this. So we have a spline that starts at its origin, which is perfect, and it grows along the x-axis. Perfect. Here we have a mesh that starts at the object origin and grows along the y direction. That's actually not ideal. Let me show you why. We go to the modifier, add modifier, deform, and add curve modifier. Then here we have an eyedropper. We can select the spline. You don't really see much happening, but if we now go into edit mode for the spline and, for example, move this one up, you see actually our object changed a little bit. And that is simply because this object is now flowing or being bent along the Bezier curve, and it's using X as a deformation axis. And if, for example, I will add multiple loop cuts, there we see now along the object X axis, it's being deformed along the X direction of the spline. Now we could, for example, set this to Y or Z, and you get all these other crazy results. So how do we make this to work? Well, if I want the object to bend along the spline and the spline grows along X, then, well, I want my object also to grow along X. So let me simply remove these loop cuts. And what I will do now, while, for example, still having the 3D cursor selected, and it's still positioned at the object center point. Or I could also do it this way, R and 90, and then I would say, for example, apply rotation. Let's go to local. Okay. So you see no rotation, but my object actually grows now towards the x-axis and not along the y-axis lengthwise. Okay, so, and if I now add the curve modifier, and then I will add loop cuts. You see actually that now my surface deforms along the spline. So the only thing we have to do now is select the object, select the spline, and then rotate along the z-axis minus 90 degrees. Oops, 90 degrees. Okay, perfect. So now basically I rotated my mesh and the spline backwards so that actually it lines up with the preliminary kind of like the basic proportional geometry I created. Okay, perfect. So what I can do now is actually the following. So now I have the luxury, for example, to play a little bit with the spline. So I can maybe bend this one down, move this handle to there, and you see then this way I start actually bending the mesh. But you see I do not modify the mesh, I actually modify simply the curve, and then the curve defines how my object is being deformed. Okay, good. So let's actually remove all these points because there's one more element I would like to make you aware of. So currently when this is a flat face, so no loop cuts, it looks like this. Okay, so it's going to edit mode, Control R, one cut, press 0, so it's at the center, and we can actually turn this on. And then you can see now where actually this loop cut would be. So it's right at this kind of at the center of this arc. You can also, for example, here turn this on, so the mesh is actually projected as a result. Again, to explain the icons for rendering visibility, this is actually giving you in edit mode a quick preview of where the mesh would be. And then with the next one, that basically takes the geometry and hides its original stage and shows it to you kind of like the way it only will be. Okay, but sometimes I simply turn this off so I can see the original mesh and, for example, the preview. Okay, so we have 1, 2, and 3 edges, and you see on the mesh they are positioned along the spline. Now this is a flat mesh, and in real life, when this is a deformable material, we simply bend it over it. So if you take a sheet of paper and bend it, it just bends. But with polygons, it doesn't work that way. So we need to add more loop cuts so we have enough geometry that can follow it. So if, for example, let's say here I add 2 more loop cuts, there you see how it actually follows it better, and maybe 2 more loop cuts. So here the curve is not, it's pretty flat, so the few points work out, and then here you see it's a little bit more tricky. So I could, for example, say, well, add a loop cut there, add a loop cut there. So you see I'm just where it is needed. Again, the wrong one, wrong edge. Here and here and here, maybe there. I can add in addition points. And maybe 1 point there. Okay, perfect. And you see the more points or more loops, the better this will follow it. So that is kind of like a requirement to consider when you want to deform polygon geometry. When you have a surface modeler that has deformation tools like spline, or twist or such commands. And then because a NURB surface is based on math, it does the deformation without the need to include actually those edges. The tool does it for you. So this, however, is just a very flat piece. So maybe I don't want to have to add all these loop cuts all the time by hand. So let's actually do this. Maybe we'll say, well, maybe we go via 3 cuts and maybe 2 cuts here. Oh wait, here we also say 3 cuts. Okay. And I would like to add a subdivision surface modifier, but maybe a simple one. So I don't have rounded edges, just a simple one. And you see I added this one at the front. And the reason why I added this one at the front is we have a very flat object. And then we add more faces to it. And then this result we give the bend modifier to bend. And there you see the result. So maybe 3. And it actually flows along it pretty good. Perfect. So let's maybe go back to the spline and let's work with it a little bit more. So maybe this point I move to there. This point I would like to move up. By the way, the nice thing about the handles is we can always work with the angle. See, every handle has its own direction. Okay. We can select these 2 points. Then we have the segment selected. Press W and say subdivide. Then we have a new point. And this point maybe we can move to there. Maybe rotate it so it's flat. We could, for example, say S, Z, and 0, so it's horizontally aligned. Snap it to this edge point. Maybe move the whole part a little bit over there. Maybe here, this one, I move to there. So I will create a nice backrest and kind of like lumber support. Okay, so you see, pretty simple. I would like to have a little bit of material thickness because this currently is flat, so we can give it a solidify modifier, maybe 1 inch to the other side, or can set this to 0. Even thickness, high quality normals, yeah. And this object actually has a scale factor, so Alt A, apply the scale. Perfect, and you see now the thickness is better. So be careful where you set the offset to, because if you make it too small, keep in mind this kind of like concave or inner arc will get smaller when we offset or shrink towards it. So I keep it, for example, for the moment there. Or if, let's say, 18 inches height, that is what we need to hit, then okay, then that actually might mean this curve, maybe I have to adjust a little bit to make it, for example, not so big. Okay, perfect, good. You see this is a tick better. So this is, for example, a very, very simple surface deformation. As you can see, we just use one spline, we orient the objects correctly, and then we push it along it. So let's turn on our reference object. So it's there. Okay, so you see, because we actually bend the object a little bit, the mesh, our 3D mesh, is just a tick too short. So in edit mode, we could, for example, select maybe these 2 points, Shift S cursor to selected. So it's actually at this edge, select everything, and then S and Y, and then we stretch it. So we make it a tick longer till, for example, it lines up with the height of our backrest. Okay, and the main reason why I did this was these lines I simply measured. Those are just strict air directions. They did not take into consideration how long the piece will be when we bend it. Because when we bend it, we need more material than having simply straight connections. Okay, great. So this is a very basic wood piece. What else can we do with it? Well, we can be a little bit more explorative. So for example, let's say we select these 2 points, or maybe this point, and I push it inwards, and then I select those and push it inwards. Maybe all those 3. And you see now I can give this a nice arc. So it looks pretty nice. So I mean, that's easily possible to do with bent plywood. While it is mainly bent this way, we can, this is not too strong, bend it along there before the material might simply break or give up. So we could not do something maybe as crazy as this. But it's good, actually. I switched it to this position. And there you see another problem, and because I set this to simple or smooth, you can see now the different results. This is nice and smooth, and the simple one gives us nice edges, but then also these transitions are kind of crappy. Okay, so let's actually switch this back to there. Okay, and I will for the moment simply keep it at the linear one. Shift spacebar, shade smooth, and we can also add smooth, sorry, the auto smooth command, so it's nice and soft. Okay, let's leave the bent plywood there for the moment. I would like to show you now how we can create the pipes. So cursor to maybe the center, so it's at the ground. Shift A, and let's create a Bezier. And there's our object. Perfect. So this might actually be a good example to show you how nice actually the path tool and the handles with its different handle types can be used to quickly preview possible pipe configurations. When you try to create pipes, for example, in Fusion, we can do that very accurately. And the parametric mode in Fusion has some other perks Blender or Alias does not have. However, the problem or the downside of how we can only create it in Fusion is it's very labor intensive. So what we can do here is quickly explore different shapes, positions, cuts, etc. And then when we know what we want, then we build that actually in Fusion. And it's not necessarily that it's a downside of Fusion, it's simply parametric modeling in general is very precise but more labor intensive. Okay, so I would like to do the same like with my bent splines. So S and Y and 0, so I line them all up. I do not have to position everything onto the object center point, but I would like maybe R and 9D rotated. Okay, good. And let's also show, for example, this plane. And this one I will move maybe to the third layer, and I will hide the second layer so I only see the first layer and the third layer. So I have nice snap targets. And then we are snapping. I can move this one and snap to there, snap to there. Where does this one go? It goes to there. Or nope, be careful with the direction. And there, can pull this in a little bit so they don't stick out too much. Okay, so to create the legs, we have one line up, one line across, and one line down, and then we have these nice arcs. So how do we do this? Well, let's subdivide it. Press T, and we can actually say 2 cuts. Okay, now this one G and snap, G and snap with control. And when we select everything with A, V, and vector, now we have nice vector lines. So if this should be a chair, then this maybe should be at least behind to where the backrest is. So maybe snap to this point. Okay. And this can be right below us. And I move this one a little bit back because later we will bend actually the front plywood over it a little bit. And maybe let's bring this back a little bit more. Okay, so this is not too bad. This looks quite okay. But we don't really have any rounded edges. So how can we model this? I will do actually one thing. So you see I moved those actually to there. So Shift D, escape. So I made a copy. And then with the object center here, you see we have along Y. Do we have along Y? No, that's only this one and this one. Okay, good. So what I will do now is go into edit mode, select everything, 3D cursor, S, X, and 0. So we aligned everything along the Z and Y plane by scaling the X direction down to 0. Good. And the main reason why I did this is now I have a nice reference object. Okay, good. So how do we get now rounded corners? Well, in a NURBS application we would have so we would have 3 linear lines, and then we would create the arcs in between. Here we can use a similar approach. We simply model the arcs. So make sure you have everything selected, and then we go, for example, either W or subdivide, and then I would like to have 2 cuts. Perfect. And that was actually not correct, because only here I would like to have 2 cuts. Sorry for the confusion. And here I only would like to have 1 cut. Perfect. Good. So before we continue, Shift A, curve, circle, and maybe set this one to 64. And now we can define the radius 3 inches maybe. And we have to route this one along here. So this is actually a lot. So maybe 1 inch, maybe 2 inches, 1.5 inches. Okay, good. And then this one we can move up, and we can move this one maybe to there. And basically now we have kind of like a preview of how maybe the rounding should look. We can do an Alt D, so we have a clone, G and Y, and move it over. Perfect. So that's very common actually, to even when you do drafting or so, you put yourself not just a fillet down, but you put yourself kind of like a circle, which can really easily help you to understand the whole rounding, how big that area is. Okay, and now here comes the trick. The reason why I created these extra points is in between each pair we have a straight line, and here we have these corner points. These corner points, however, I do not want anymore, so I delete them. And now I have, as you can see, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight lines. But that's not what I want. So this one I will move forward, and this one, let's see, using normal, does it work? And bounding box. Okay, I can move, for example, this one I would like to be aligned, so it's aligned actually to there, and aligned, aligned, and aligned. Then I can move this one up, maybe to there. And there you see now actually we have kind of like a curve, and that is because these points are, or handles are pushed out way too much, and you see it now when we actually push these handles back, and I can kind of like eyeball the direction. There we can just rebuild a nice rounded curve. Just match this and there. Perfect. See, very easy. So again, to here I want to put this one to where the horizontal line cuts the arc, because that's basically where it's tangent. This one has to go back. This goes back, and then this one goes, I have to zoom in for that, maybe to somewhere there. This one is actually too far to the right, so maybe there. Okay, and then I can pull this one down, pull this one in, and there we are. Nice. Perfect. That's pretty good. See, wasn't very difficult. Okay, so how do we give this whole thing actually now the pipe radius? So currently this is just a spline, and we can extrude along that spline a shape. So maybe by moving the 3D cursor away to somewhere there, Shift A, and then I will select, for example, the Bezier circle. Okay, go into top view, see I can scale this one in object mode, that's fine. And here now we can give this a diameter, maybe 1 inch and 1 inch. And this, for example, we should give a name. So maybe pipe 1 inch profile. Okay, perfect. Or we can also keep this on the ground or place it to somewhere else. It's up to you. Maybe I will place it to here. And you know what? To make sure I always find where the thing is, I will create a small plane around it, and I will delete only the face. So I always have a small rectangle that basically frames it. Okay, so what is this useful for? Now I can select my path, go to the path properties. So you see instead of mesh is actually now path. And then I go to the bevel object, click on the eyedropper, select my ring. There. Now in shaded mode you can see there is the pipe. Okay. Feels a little bit thick, so maybe let's change this to 0.5 to 0.5. Let's see, that's thinner, or 0.75, 0.75. Perfect. Okay, so the way how this works is basically you see this circle has again a center point, and the center point is being run across this path, and then this basically creates this pipe. if actually in edit mode we would do something like this. Let's say we add one more, there you see we have no 2. If maybe we add even one more, now we have 3. So it doesn't matter how many profiles we have in there, all you need is simply an object. And in our case, obviously, we only want to have one profile in it. But I just wanted to show you basically how this works, because there is my path and you see how the orientation works. Okay, so delete and delete. So let's take a look at how this pipe actually works out together, for example, with our bent plywood, and we see we have a little issue here. So there are 2 possibilities. Either I readjust, for example, the path for the pipe. That basically means if I go into edit mode, all this, for example, I have to push down till it somewhat rests below. So that was good. But then I would also have to adjust, for example, the rest of my sketch. So these elements, because they are all off at the moment. So that's one way. Or the second way is in here. Now I have to figure out actually which direction it is. Okay. So at this point, I would like to have my object center point. So Shift S, cursor to selected, and then in object mode, set origin to 3D cursor. And there. Okay. No, that's actually not right, because you see how actually it did the offset. So the software just fooled me here for a second. Here, that's the one, the Y one. So it has to go to this point. So let's take a look. Yeah, see now it fits actually into that predefined radius. Okay, good. And again, pipes we do in Blender are more for visual reference, because later in Fusion we would rebuild them. But you can see we can actually trick around a lot and be very fast exploring different ideas. So let's actually add a mirror modifier. And you see now it is on the other side. We can be even a little bit more playful. So maybe let's select those 2. Can, for example, push this out. So, you know, the way how this bends, but be careful how everything else deforms as well. So maybe I need to push this one over there. Or maybe this one I only want to push out and a little bit further to the back. So the nice thing is you can see all these lines, because this one is a vector and this one is aligned, they all actually work together, so they always maintain being aligned, which is really nice. G and Y there. Okay. Maybe let's keep it, for example, this way a little bit. Okay, good. Great, so that was basically just a very basic pipe. So let's say between here I would like to have some sort of a cross connection. Maybe I use a pipe as well. Let's try that for the exercise. So cursor to selected, and then Bezier, and S and Y and 0, for example, and then now we can actually, in this case, maybe use the grid snapping. and I will move this one maybe to there, and I will move this one, whoops, wrong key. I will move this one with G and push it to there, and then I have to also position these points correctly. Maybe this one I pull to there and there. This one doesn't matter much because it is outside, but I try to work evenly. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So one back. Okay, at least now I have basically two sides which are exactly symmetrically modeled. So I use the grid in this case. And now I, for example, can be free and try to scale these handles towards each other or away, move them equally up or down, and this way always maintain a nice arc. Okay, and the last thing I would like to do is maybe I will pull this down so it looks like it is kind of like at the center of it. So there, maybe a little bit higher. Okay, good. So I will, you know what, I will actually create another circle, and then now in object mode I would say please be 0.5 inch and along X be 2 inch. Let's zoom in. Okay, that's good. And maybe call this crossbar, and then I will give another, or not another, I will give this path, this one as the profile. Okay, in case your profile is rotated, like something like, oh, what happened here? Huh, interesting. R and Z. Oh, interesting how it did not rotate the other way. Ah, they're all normal. Let's say aligned. R and Z, yeah, there. Let's say your piece is rotated this way. You just have to, along the Z-axis, rotate it 90 degrees. Okay, so now you see we can basically sculpt whatever we have here so that we get kind of like maybe the shape we want. In this case, maybe something that's a little bit more blockish. So I'm scaling these parts like this. Okay. And this is actually 2 inch. Yeah, good. The whole path, maybe I move a little bit to the front. And do we have an array modifier for this one? No, we do not. Okay, not a big deal. Alt D, so we make a clone, and then Y, we can move it over, maybe to have a second one. Perfect. Okay, so for concept model, I simply intersect the pipe geometry with each other. I do not necessarily here have to model it so it's filleted, etc., because in real life I would actually take the dimensions of pipe what I need, cut it, bend it, and then weld it. So for render purpose, we would, if we want to be realistic, then we would actually have to create a weld seam, and in this case we can simply leave it this way, because chances are very high that when the shell is over it, we don't see it anyway. Perfect, but maybe like from the back or somewhere we might see how something is connected. So, talking about connected, because I created this one actually as clones. So Alt D, you see I can modify both at the same time. And maybe bring this one up to there. Okay. Perfect. Okay, nice. So let's refine actually the backrest a little bit. So this is for the moment just our basic dummy. So Shift D, I will make a true copy, M and 4. And I would like to revise this one a little bit, and also I would like to have rounded edges instead of those sharp edges. So how do I do this? And what I will show you now is basically the downside of this technique. It's not, in certain areas it's very nice and fast to sculpt with it, but the problem is we always need to have a proper amount of CVs at certain strategic positions so we can work with it. Also, here, where is it? There? No, that's not the one. Ah, there. This one I would like to make a copy, Shift D, M and 4. Okay, so this one should have this one. Okay, perfect. Good. So with the legs visible, I actually would like now to take maybe these two, subdivide it, and then this one I move over, because now this point I would like to bring down and just rotate a little bit. Maybe like this. So keep in mind these are 2 inches, 3 inches, no? There and there. For the moment, maybe hide the mesh so it's easier to see how we're deforming everything. Okay, good. So this looks fine. This one actually has to move way over to there. You see that's where the radius starts. So now we can adjust this one a little bit more. And if we want to be more precise, we can put this one to there and bring this back. Yeah. Okay, good. Alt H, let's show the object. Now you see actually the front part rolls down a little bit. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to have the exact amount of CVs where I need it to be for sculpting. Then the rest I will leave untouched, and also these edges I would like to have rounded. So this one I will turn off for the moment. This one we can keep. Let's go into edit mode, and there we can see here this is very blocky. So more or less I need to have an additional loop cut there, and this is already a tick better. Okay, with the smooth command turned on, yeah. What's up with the rest, the back area? So maybe I will turn this to 2. Why do I choose? Because I have a little bit less of geometry all across the board. That means I would need to by hand insert some extra points myself, but this one, for example, I think I can remove for the moment. So you see I start cleaning up everything and only add the geometry where I really need it. So I also have this backrest bend, and this loop cut basically defines where or how deep this arc goes. So you see if I want the loop cut to stop, or this bend to stop at the midpoint, then at the midpoint I also need to have this loop cut, because basically this is the distance from there to there. Okay, so that worked actually so far pretty good. Let's for the moment, for example, delete those and this one. So we have this shape, and now I would like to cut actually the sides so I have nice sharp rounded edges, but not so superly round like here. And this is basically where I mentioned the downside of it, because in certain situations it can happen that we will end up with a lot of geometry. So I will, for example, create 3 loop cuts, 0 and enter. And then these loop cuts I can scale along, in my case, along X away. And that basically then defines kind of like, again, this rounding. And the same principle here applies as well. If you want to have nice circular roundings, maybe try to get nice squares at these edges. So here we'll add another one just to have more points. And then in the back, I have to do the same. Control R. And there you can see how it sharpens the edge. Okay, perfect. Good. So here again, this, for example, I can move down. So I actually bend that surface. But you see that because these points are linear, also here this looks more a little bit linear. So I want to select those points and also bend this a little bit there. And maybe these I can adjust a little bit more this way and there. Okay, good, nice. Let's show the solidify modifier. Okay, nice. This is a little bit, maybe half an inch. Let's make this a little bit thinner. Nice. Okay, so you see that didn't look too bad. Let's maybe do one last thing. So I will create a cube, then edit mode, I will scale this maybe to something like this. And this, there, okay. And then I can move this one maybe to somewhere there, rotate it. And that's right. We will use this one to cut out a shape or handle. We can bevel actually the round, the edges. I will only round, or I only want those edges to be beveled. And in most computer graphics programs, unlike CAD, we can either weight an edge or we can make a point selection. And I will show you the weighting. So we here have mean bevel weight. We can set this to 1. Nothing here really changed. But when we set this to weight now, you see only those edges that have a weight will actually get rounded. So maybe 1 inch for the rounding. You see also here 1 means it's 100%, so 100% of the width. If, for example, I select these 2 edges and say 0.5, then this is 50% of the width. So in this case, 0.5 inches. Okay, maybe 10 cuts, 0.6, so it's a little bit more organic looking. We can shade this one smooth and turn on the auto smooth. For visibility purpose, I don't want this one to be blocky and visible, so I turn this one to wire. And then also here for cycles rendering, I turn, for example, all this off, so it's gone. Perfect. And then I will give this object one Boolean modifier, different, and then here select the cube. I can, for example, call this one Boolean handle. This is sculpted backrest. This is maybe new sculpted spline or bent spline. Okay, so always don't forget to give those objects names. And then this way, by having this set actually to wire, we can take a look at it all the time and manipulate it. Maybe we go to local, AA, S and YY, scale it down more. I have to adjust actually probably the fillet radius. This is too much. There. Okay, perfect. So you don't have to move them to different layers all the time. So the objects that we use to cut something out, we can simply still see, but we turn their shading so they only show up as a wireframe. Okay, great. So now I would say at this point we have most of our stuff done, so that I could show you how we can then actually do the material for the bent plywood.